Nothing on the show is to be construed as legal advice. The contents of this show are for informational purposes only.
Hi there, welcome to another episode of Know Your Rights, the Consumer Lawcast with me, your host, Abbas Kazerounian. I'm here with Anthony Chester, or Tony as we call him, and Mona Amini, and we've got a very, very special episode for you. But first, hi Tony and Mona.
Hi Abbas, how you doing?
Hi Abbas.
Good, thank you. So today we're going to be kind of talking about the aftermath of the pandemic and what that means for consumers in the fair credit reporting, and how it affects their credit reporting and the debt collection world, and how consumers are going to be affected by ever increasing and more aggressive debt collection practices. Because I think, as you both know, there were some freezes that were going on that landlords couldn't collect on, rent, and certain debt collectors had to be cease their activity during the pandemic. But most of those, in most jurisdictions, have ceased, and the debt collection activity has commenced again at quite an aggressive level. And so let's start there, Mona. So what are the patterns that we're seeing, and what kind of collection activity are we talking about?
Yeah, sure. So, with the world reopening, and businesses reopening, that includes debt collectors. So we're definitely seeing an uptick in, credit card lawsuits or debt collection lawsuits, debt collection communications to consumers, whether it be calls, letters. Things are getting back to normal, and unfortunately, that means debt collection is getting back to normal too. So people are, they're suffering the same, issues that they had pre-pandemic, but of course now it can be a little bit more difficult with the financial impact that it's had on everybody during the past year or so.
Right. I think you kind of honed in on something that's important, because most people think that debt collectors only are collecting by telephone, but that's not always the case. They could be collecting from you, obviously on the telephone, which is the most, obvious one and the one that happens the most, but they also write letters to you. They send text messages to you. And they can even leave notices on your door in certain scenarios. So debt collection activity doesn't have to necessarily be just narrowed down to telephone calls. And so both of you, Tony and Mona, what are the things that consumers should be looking out for to know whether their rights are being violated in debt collection activity? Obviously, we could have a whole week of this podcast on the ways that your rights can be violated. I'm talking about something that a layperson can observe or hear and should be on the lookout for, as far as whether their rights are being violated.
Yeah, so some really clear-cut examples are getting calls at unusual times. So the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act protects you from getting calls at, at a really early hour, or a late hour, for example, before 8 a.m. or after 9 p.m. So those are some easy things to look out for a consumer. Pay attention to your phone calls. It's counterintuitive and it can seem intimidating and overwhelming, but when you're getting contacted by debt collectors, it behooves you to pick up the phone to find out what's going on, who's contacting you, what they're contacting you about. We suggest keeping, a notepad handy by your phone, or, if it's your cell phone, you can always punch it into your little notes app or what you have on your phone. Get organized, keep letters. Letters themselves can often have, violations or misrepresentations on them. There's certain disclosures that need to be included on letters that might not be obvious to a consumer, but we're one of the firms that can help if you have questions about a debt collection communication you're receiving from a debt collector, or even a creditor. We're somebody that you can reach out to and show us that letter. It's a good idea to keep all the letters that you receive, and the more organized you can be, the better.
Yeah. So Tony, Mona mentioned, keeping a pad by the telephone. What kind of things are we looking, to be for our clients to be writing down, for example?
Well, one of the things Mona mentioned was the time of the call. Certainly, if calls come in very, very, very early in the morning or very, very late at night, you're going to want to record the time in which those calls were coming in. You're going to want to note who you spoke to, what you spoke about, what was the amount of debt that they requested from you, who did they say they worked for, who did they say that the debt originated from, What was the originating amount? Is there an interest factor? These are all things that can be very, very important to document, because if you later get letters, for example, another thing that Mona mentioned, that maybe deviate or are different from what was represented on the phone, it's important to see, trying to figure out what in fact is, if anything, owed. So making sure you document everything to the best extent you can while you're on the phone will help you making sure that you can protect your rights should the case proceed further.
Exactly. And I think as far as the timing of the call, I think both as Mona and Tony mentioned is very, very important. If the call is on your cell phone, the best documentation of it is the call log itself. You can take a screenshot on a smartphone of, what time and what date the call came in and on. Obviously, notate it as well. But I think another issue is, some people think, well, why am I writing this down? Well, there's various reasons. There's actually two reasons. Number one is that the debt collector is keeping contemporaneous notes on their end, on their computer. They have a headset on and they're writing down whatever they think how the conversation went. And that's their perspective. And even if it's truth in their mind, it's going to be perhaps different to the way you perceive the conversation. So why should you not have the same advantage as the debt collector? And, I don't want to get in too much legalese here, but I think we've all seen TV shows where they say objection hearsay, where you can't get an out of court statement into evidence. But one of those exceptions are contemporaneous business records, right? And so what the debt collector is writing is admissible in court. Now, even if you're writing some chicken scratch on the back of an envelope and it's contemporaneous, you have the same advantage of preserving evidence for if this gets into litigation later. And I think that's something that you should know as a consumer to help you preserve your rights. So, those are good tips, guys. So thank you. But what about text messages, letters, envelopes? So talk to me about that, Mona.
Yeah, so more and more we're hearing about, debt collectors contacting consumers via text, email, the same as letters. You want to keep those, try to keep them organized according to whatever account or debt collector is contacting you. Envelopes are important as well. Sometimes, later it becomes apparent that, maybe a letter wasn't sent on the date indicated on the letter. It might have been sent later, depending on the postmark. Sometimes the window of the envelope can reveal your personal or sensitive information, some of these clear envelope windows. So, knowing the whole picture, keeping everything you receive is really to your benefit. Even if you plan on paying some of these debt collectors, it's best to know who you owe, how much you owe, and, what happened with your communications with them, because often somebody who's receiving communications from one debt collector may be receiving communications from multiple. So it can get really overwhelming and confusing when you have a lot of people sending you things and you might mix it up. So the more you keep, the better.
So let me ask a question, Tony. So what Mona just said. So I'm John Smith living on Main Street, and I'm behind on some debts, some credit card debt. Debt collector starts calling me, and I'm keeping some contemporaneous records. The same debt collector texts me and sends me some letters. And to me, it just says, "Dear Mr. Smith, you owe us a bunch of money," which I very well may do. Blah, blah, blah. This may be an attempt to collect a debt. Lots of love, Joe, debt collector. Why do I need to keep this?
Well, one thing that Mona touched on here is, for example, this is one debt collector that may be coming after you for one debt. That debt they may then be transferred on to another debt collector. Having a complete list or file of all communications you've had with a specific debt collector helps keep things organized for you to make sure that you understand what debt such and such company is coming after you for, whatever the debt collection agency is. Moreover, if there are inconsistencies or if there are different things that are appearing in those different communications, say in one text message they say you owe $100, in a letter they say you owe $110. On the phone, they're telling you owe $150, but only if you pay today. All those different things, you're not really sure what the answer is, and making sure you have a complete list of all those communications and a complete file of all those communications will help you reconcile what the real true story is, and ultimately help you preserve your rights should you have some kind of matter you can bring forward.
So let me kind of try and bring this full loop from what Mona and Tony were just saying. Everything that they say is right, but let's even break it down into a little bit more like simplistic nature, which is debt collectors, they collect in a form of in writing, whether it's text, letter, and phone call and email. And that's becoming a more popular method of collection. So those are the four main methods of collection. Now, to the layperson, and even to some lawyers that don't practice in this area, what these communications are saying very well may be violating the consumer's right. Because the statutes that protect consumer, most specifically on a nationwide level, it's called the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. And then there are certain states like California, Massachusetts that have their own sister statutes that protect on a, like give consumers even more rights. These statutes are very technical. They're very, very complicated. And in fact, the Supreme Court, the US Supreme Court, has described the FDCPA as a complex statute. And so what I'm getting at is most people don't know that their rights are being violated through these mediums of communication when the debt collector is contacting you. So what does that mean? That means is that you as the consumer probably don't know, right? And so you should basically investigate that and explore that. Mona, how would somebody explore that?
How would somebody explore whether their rights are being violated?
Yeah.
I mean, a real easy way is to, reach out to one of us at our firm. I mean, we do free consultation. So, if you do feel like something is off, if you feel harassed or, you feel that some of the communications aren't making sense to you, or maybe you feel shortchanged on information that they're providing you, a really easy way to help figure things out and see if you do have maybe a potential case against these debt collectors to help turn the tables is to reach out to one of us. We have a lot of attorneys in different offices in various states, and obviously, there's going to be somebody that can help answer your questions. So that's one really easy way to try to address that issue.
That's exactly right. And Kazerounian Law Group, we're multi-jurisdictional, and we try and help people most places in the country. But let's say we're not there. The one thing you as the consumer must know is that these are areas where no lawyer should be charging you for anything. Okay, this is an area of law that you should get a free consultation. And if the lawyer decides that there is a case, again, they should not be asking you for money. Why, Tony?
Well, under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, as well as some other state law statutes, other consumer statutes we might talk about today, there's what's known as a fee shifting provision, or a provision that allows consumers, should they prevail in their lawsuit, for the defendant to have to pay that consumer's attorney's fees. So ultimately, consumer attorneys like us, as well as others around the country, can take these cases on a contingency fee basis, where you don't have to pay us any money up front, no money out of pocket, and even if you lose, ultimately you're not going to have to pay us back for our time we put into the case.
Exactly right. And the thing is most consumers don't know this. They don't even know of the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. Never mind the fact that it has an attorney's fees provision, which allows attorneys to represent you and get the money from the other side, so that consumers that are in debt don't have to be, pay it. And when Congress came up with this law, they thought about this, right? They're like, well, if we're trying to protect consumers that are in debt and being collected upon illegally, they're probably not going to be able to pay hourly to expensive lawyers, right? And so they built in this provision to help exactly these type of people. But most people, and including most lawyers, are not educated on this. And so it's really, really important that you empower yourself and just go investigate. Because even if you understand the letter, if it makes perfect sense, it doesn't mean that they're not violating your rights. And the only way you can tell is by going to a subject matter expert that knows this area inside and out. Whether that's Kazerounian Law Group or somebody else in your geographic area, it's definitely worth exploring it. So let's go transition a little bit from the debt collection kind of period, like arena, should we go, and to what is very much interlinked and related, which is credit reporting. So people may have been in forbearances, people may have had their debts frozen and they're coming out again. Not only are they being affected by debt collectors, which you and Mona very eloquently talked about just now, but it's also going to affect their credit reports, Tony. Like, first of all, let's just start from a kind of a very foundational point of view. How important is your credit in the U.S. society right now?
Your credit's everything. It not only impacts your ability to potentially own a home, to own a car. It could impact your ability to get a job. It affects every facet of your life. It is incredibly important to be on top of it, make sure it's accurate, and make sure you are putting your best foot forward for others that are ultimately viewing your credit history.
Exactly right. And just to like, expand on a little bit, like Tony just absolutely rightly said, it affects every aspect of your life. And we live in a credit-based system, right? Like everything that we do in our lives is really affected by our credit. So like Mona goes and tries to finance a vehicle, whether it's a purchase or a lease, what's the first thing that they do? They're going to pull your credit report, right? If you're trying to get a mortgage, if you're trying to get a mortgage for a house, the first thing that's done is they pull your credit report. If you're trying to finance your furniture, your computer, your TV, everything in your life is basically revolving around your credit report. And Mona, if your credit score is good in comparison to bad, what does that do to the financing?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a good or bad credit score, it can affect the rate of interest that you receive. It can affect the amount of credit they're willing to grant you. You might be able to get a credit card, but it might have really unfavorable terms if you have poor credit. Really high interest rates, really low credit limits, things like that. And that can obviously impact you in the long run. You're not able to get the credit that you need to make the purchases that you and your family need to make. So, credit can definitely affect you. You can pay more in interest in the long run, of course. So the same, $200 TV is going to cost somebody who has, lesser credit score something more in the long run, for example.
Exactly right. And the thing is, in the case of a mortgage, one interest rate point, like over a 30-year
Sure.
fixed mortgage, can cost somebody hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, it may only look like 1%, the difference between like 2.9% and 3.9%, which is the difference between an 800 plus credit score and a 690 credit score. That 1 point over 30 years, when it's amortized with that interest rate, is going to cost the consumer a lot of money. And so these are the things that you have to consider. So what is your advice, Tony? I'm coming out of the pandemic. I may or may not have been in debt. I don't think that makes it any I don't think that even is relevant. I think everybody should follow your advice on this. What do I do to make sure that my credit is protected, like coming out of this pandemic right now?
First thing you do is you pull your credit reports. You are able to pull your credit reports for free. Pre-pandemic, it was once per year. But now you're able to pull your credit reports from the three major bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, once per week. And that's going to remain the case until approximately April 2022. And you should take advantage of that. Being able to check your credit reports to make sure that things are accurate, that all credit items that are on there you recognize, and moreover, to also make sure that companies aren't pulling your credit report that you don't recognize, that you didn't have a relationship with, or you didn't ask to try to get some kind of credit through. So reviewing your credit report is the first step. Then making sure that everything's on there is accurate is the next step. And if not, then you may have additional things you can do beyond that if you notice some things that are wrong.
Okay, let's go step by step to the accuracy, but let's go by the pulling. So first of all, that's massive, right? Like most people didn't even know that they could pull their credit report for free once a year before anyway. But now you're telling us that you can, for free, pull from the big three, TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax, free every week until basically, until when did you say?
April 2022, so spring next year.
For almost another 8 months or so. And so that in itself has inherent value, right? Because like after your free credit report, it probably costs you $10, $20 per credit report to pull, right?
Yeah, it absolutely can. It depends on the bureau, but yeah, it certainly can be costly for a consumer.
So you get that savings right now and you should utilize it. But let me ask you a question, Tony. If I'm pulling my credit report weekly, is that going to hurt my credit report?
Absolutely not. It's your credit report to begin with. And even if it were considered some kind of pull, it would be a soft pull. So soft pulls do not impact your credit score at all. Hard pulls, to contrast that, if you're seeking credit, that is something that would impact your credit score. But a soft pull or a pull in which you're reviewing your own credit, say, for example, you're even viewing it through Credit Karma, that's considered a soft pull. That does not impact your credit score.
Okay, so let's move to step 2, and you kind of mentioned accuracy. Like, so I pulled my credit report from all the big 3. I've got 3 credit reports that probably resemble each other with different headers because they're different, pulled from different credit bureaus. What am I looking for?
So even before I go into that, if you don't mind, how to pull your credit reports,
Right.
I think really,
Yeah,
really important.
absolutely.
You can go to annualcreditreport.com. It's a mandated website through the FCRA that allows you one portal you can go to pull your credit reports. There's also a one-page form you can fill out and send. There's a telephone number you can call and respond to an automated system to verify your identity, where then the bureaus will send you your credit reports. So it's a very, very user-friendly process, be it online, by phone, or by mail. You can get your credit reports for free.
Can you give the website one more time?
Annualcreditreport.com.
Okay, perfect.
So as to accuracy, the second question you asked, in looking at your credit report, one of the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you recognize all the accounts that are on your credit reports. So do you have a Capital One account? Do you have a Wells Fargo account? Do you have a Smith Credit Line account? Whatever it is,
Right.
make sure you recognize all of those credit accounts, that those are items that you either had or you currently have. Next.
So what if I don't?
If you don't have one of those accounts, there could be any number of reasons for it, and we'll discuss what those might look like. But the next step is to dispute the accuracy of that information. Say you don't have a credit card company A account. You can then write a letter to the credit reporting bureau that's reporting it. Say it's only one of them, maybe it's only Equifax, or maybe it's TransUnion, or whoever else, or maybe it's all 3. You write letters individually to those bureaus and say and note, I do not have this account. I don't live at this address. Whatever it is, whatever information you have on your credit report that's inaccurate, explain to them what's inaccurate, why it's inaccurate, and what you want them to change it to. So in the example of an inaccurate report, you want them to delete it. You may have to go further and provide additional evidence, and we can talk about what that might look like for inaccurate accounts.
Negative though. So there's a Chase bank account or credit card on my credit report, and it doesn't. I've never had a relationship with Chase. I don't I just have zero relationship with Chase for whatever reason. I've always had an adverse reaction to Chase in my hypothetical, and I want to send additional evidence that this is not mine. But how do I prove that this is not mine? How do I prove a negative?
So there's a couple of different things you can pull out on your credit report. One, if you have some addresses that appear on your credit report that aren't yours, that might be indicative of the fact that there might be some identity theft going on. Someone might be using your identity that might have that JP Morgan Chase account that you weren't aware of. An address that you don't recognize, that you've never lived at, especially if it's in a different state that you've never lived in, that might be one telling item to indicate that someone else has this account that's appearing on your credit report. Could be identity theft, could be something what's known as a mixed file. You might have a very common name, and someone with your same name, Joe Smith, and you're Joe Smith, that Joe Smith's Chase account is appearing on your credit file. Again, your addresses will indicate that maybe one of his addresses is populating onto your account. If it's a situation involving identity theft, for example, you may have to take additional steps. You may have to file a police report. You may have to file an ID theft.
Can I just put a pin in that? I definitely want to come back to this, but let's just one step. Mona, first of all, let's say English is my second language, or I'm just a little unsure on how to dispute the way that Tony's saying. It's just like it's intimidating, right? And first of all, can I get a lawyer to help me? 2, does it cost me anything? And number 3, what method do I use to mail it? Do I just do U.S. mail, certified mail, or can I do it online on email, for example? Can you I know I threw a lot of questions at you right there.
Yes.
Just take some of that, and Tony, by all means, feel free to jump in as well.
Sure. So certainly, there are consumer attorneys that can address your questions, through a free consultation. Most of them will offer that to a consumer. An attorney can help guide you through reviewing your credit report. They can help maybe, point you in the right direction on how to do these dispute letters for yourself. Some ways that you can send a dispute letter are there is the availability to do it online through the Bureau's website. The issue is that sometimes is that, like Tony was saying, if you want to provide any documentation, it can be difficult sometimes depending on which credit bureau to attach, whether it be an ID theft affidavit, whether it be, a copy of something that you want to include, like your driver's license. It can be difficult to include all that you want to include, and you might be limited to a small text box. So you may instead want to do it by certified mail directly to the address that they provide on the Bureau's website for their dispute resolution sort of address. You can also do it via fax sometimes. They have a fax number sometimes that you can send it into. So there's certainly a lot of ways. Certified mail and fax are definitely good because you have confirmation that it was received on the other end. It's good to know from the consumer's perspective that, it didn't just go out into some empty void or get lost in the mail. It's good to know that the other side received it, and then so that they know potentially a response is coming back.
And I would echo the point that certified mail is definitely a way to go as opposed to just submitting an online dispute. I know a lot of consumers will do it online because it's quick and it's easy. The problem is often you're left with a pre-populated list that might not actually cover what the actual issue is that you have with that account. A letter gives you a lot of latitude to discuss exactly what is wrong and why it's wrong. And then you can attach all those documents that you need to prove up why, for example, an account is inaccurate. So it's really important to go that direction. It empowers you the best you can to give them, the credit reporting agency, everything they need to get the inaccurate information off of your report.
Great. So I just have one other point. Sometimes with some of the bureaus, if you go online, you may be committing yourself to an arbitration agreement, which you will not be doing if you go through certified mail, for example. So that's another reason why that's on the bottom of the list of methods to communicate with them rather than fax or certified mail. Would you agree with that?
I would say so. Certainly you want to make sure that you're preserving all avenues for you to resolve your dispute, not just limiting yourself to arbitration, for example, if you commit yourself to a binding arbitration provision.
Great. So I want to go back to what you said earlier when I said, let's put a pin in it and go back to that. And you were talking about disputes and police reports. So if you'd pick up from there, that'd be great.
Sure. So a lot of consumers, unfortunately, experience issues of identity theft. Could be someone you've never known, someone who took your information, could be, and sometimes is, family members or people that you know. One step that you can take in order to prove up your dispute about, for example, an account not being yours, is going and getting a police report that you can attach to your dispute. You can also do a fraud affidavit or an ID theft affidavit as it relates to any particular account that you can attach to your dispute as well. You can go to the FTC website for guidance on filling out a fraud affidavit or an ID theft affidavit. So those are good critical pieces of information that you can use that will force the credit reporting agencies to actually take a closer look and show that you have substantiating or corroborating information that this isn't my account. It never was my account. Someone took it out in my name, and please take it off my report because it's hurting me.
Okay. And how do you decipher whether you need to file a police report or exactly if I'm, you're hypothetical, I'm Joe Smith living on Main Street, how do I know the difference between when to just send a dispute and when I've got to go and get a police report to add to my dispute?
So, it's tough. If you've got a number of accounts that are appearing on your credit report that are extremely derogatory, and you have some inkling of perhaps someone has stolen your identity, be it you lost critical pieces of information that verify your identity and someone could have picked it up, or that either someone or family member has taken some of your information in order to create a new account. That's a situation where you have more certainty and it makes a lot of sense to move forward with a police report or an ID theft affidavit. In situations where you've got a very common name and you are not sure that if someone is taking your identity or if it's just a matter of someone's accounts are showing up on your credit report, maybe some of them are positive, maybe some of them are negative. But in that situation, the first step may be to just do an initial dispute explaining that none of these accounts are yours, that you have never lived at this address. Any accounts that are associated with that address, that date of birth, or whatever else, remove them for your credit report. You don't just have to dispute once. If it comes back and they verify all the information, you can then think about what you need to do next time around for the next dispute.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, I mean, as Mona said earlier, I'm sorry, Mona, you go.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I would just add to that sometimes in the response, it can also indicate what other information they want from you, the credit bureaus want from you. So sometimes they're, they'll ask you for that identity theft affidavit. They have, some sort of one that you can fill through the FTC's website too. But sometimes the response from the credit bureaus can also help you understand what else you need to provide them.
Exactly. That's very, very interesting. So, I think, one of the, one of the big takeaways from today's podcast is on both scenarios, whether it's debt collection or whether it's credit reporting, if you're not sure, you should be able to get a free consultation from somebody that does this area of law. And generally, lawyers that do FDCPA generally may also do FCRA. It's kind of because it all goes, so much, they're all kind of blended together. And as far as, the debt collection goes, keep everything. And like Mona said, pick up the telephone, write down what they say. The more they talk, the more they communicate with you, the more likely they are that they're violating your rights. And don't be afraid to call a lawyer, because you should get free consult, as we just talked about it. On credit report, do what Tony says. Pull your credit report on a weekly basis right now. It's free. Okay, why not use it when it's available to you? Empower yourselves and use that information and make sure that everything is accurate. And if it's not, again, consult a lawyer. Any kind of, and Tony, we're going to have you back and just do a show just on FCRA, because I think that's long overdue. And Mona and I already have an episode on the FDCPA, which is being fairly well viewed as well. And we'll definitely be doing recurring podcasts on debt collection. But any last words of wisdom on the Fair Credit Reporting Act, Tony?
I would only note that looking at CFPB complaints from 2019 to 2020, the number of complaints has gone significantly up for inaccurate credit reporting issues because of forbearances, because of all kinds of different things that got mixed up in the course of this pandemic. It's only made things worse for consumers, or it's made things very difficult for consumers to maintain accurate credit files. It's made it tough for financial institutions to comply with what exactly went on through the course of things. So reviewing your credit report, making sure everything's accurate, pulling it to the extent that you can on a weekly basis, or at least making sure you're regularly looking at items. It's really helpful for you to protect your rights and make sure that you're putting your best foot forward for lenders that look at your credit report going forward.
Exactly. And if you've got any questions on the Fair Credit Reporting Act or your credit report, the accuracy of it, feel free to email Tony at tony@kazlg.com, and Zach, our producer, will put his email on the screen for you. And Mona, what about you? Last words of wisdom on the on unfair debt collections.
Like we kind of said before, keep track of everything, keep notes, know who's talking to you about what. Information is power, I guess they say. So the more you know, and the more you know about your own accounts, the better. Don't let these debt collectors bully you. Be an informed consumer. And if you need help, then, we're always here to reach out to.
Thank you. And if you need to get hold of Mona, ask any questions on debt collection issues, it's mona@kazlg.com. Zach will also put that on there. And thanks again for tuning in and, watching us and listening to great panelists that we had. And until next time, keep it legal.